Welcome to the fourth and last lecture of our Food as Medicine series. I'm Lori Anasio. I'm one of the dietitians over at the hospital, and today we have Lexi Youngbluth, who's been here with us all the way, and Dr. Faraci over here, and Allison Fernald, who will be doing our cooking demo this afternoon. And we're really excited to bring you the kind of culminating information to wrap this stuff all up in a nice little package for you to bring home and really start making some changes if you want to, or start thinking about things differently, whatever it is that motivates you to take a step toward a direction of better health. So we're going to be going over the last three lectures briefly, just so that we can, there may be some people, is anybody here who hasn't been to all of the lectures? So we'll do a little brief review so that you can hear some of the key points that we mentioned in the previous lectures. We'll also be talking about dieting and diet culture. We'll have a stretch break and the food demo pretty early on, and then we'll move into health at every size that Lexi will be talking to us about, and Dr. Faraci. And then we'll move into intuitive eating and mindful eating, and then wrap up with some questions and discussion if you have any. And the class objective for today is to appreciate the social and emotional constructs and implications of food and obesity, as well as the power of intuitive eating and the health at every size movement. So we'll be getting into that after I do the review of the last three lectures. So the key messages that we've got from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and that was the topic that we covered in the very first class. The key messages really are to increase our intake of nutrient-dense foods. Do we remember what nutrient-dense foods, what the definition is? Anybody want to offer the definition?
Higher fiber.
Higher fiber, that's one thing. Yeah, so higher fiber, higher nutritional value. So things that have, foods that have a higher amount of nutritional value compared to the calories that they have. Also, increasing fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes, and seafood is another area where we fall short as Americans. So the Dietary Guidelines for Americans does recommend that we increase our intake of foods from these groups. And by increasing those food groups, we actually will increase calcium, vitamin D, potassium, and fiber, which are some of the nutrients of concern that can contribute to long-term disease and nutrition-related diseases. And then lastly, to decrease added sugars, added fats, and sodium. And has anybody gone to the dietaryguidelines.gov website during this course of this presentation? We do have a couple who have. It's full of information. There's so much information there. So if you're looking for, more details and more information about the dietary guidelines, go to the website, and they have stuff that's really geared towards more scientific minds, and they have stuff that's geared more towards practical minds. They have a lot of information that's really helpful. So we also talked about different tools that you can use to actually implement the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. So once we have the guidelines and we have an idea of what are the kinds of things that we need to be improving in our diets and what things we can cut back on, then we need to know how we're going to do that. And so one of the things we can use is the nutrition facts label, which is shown here. And the nutrition facts label should be on all products, showing you what the serving size is, how many calories per serving, how many grams of fat, et cetera, et cetera. So that can help you get the information that you need in order to make decisions about which foods you're going to purchase. The next thing that we can use is the My Plate. So that's the icon, the educational tool that helps us implement the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. And so if we just look at our plate, just very simply look at the plate, and we divide it into quarters if we're mathematically oriented, or we can just divide it into 4 equal parts. And we put protein in one of those parts, we put fruits in one of those parts, we put vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, and we put grains in the last part. And then we can have a calcium-rich beverage or dessert or something of that nature to round it out. And that's just an easy visual way to see, am I meeting all of the different food group recommendations? And then, of course, menu planning and grocery lists can be really helpful if you've set goals for yourself and you want to, for example, eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Well, making a menu plan and then making your grocery list out of that menu plan will assure that you do actually achieve that goal. So moving on to physical activity, which is another one of the key messages that came out of these presentations. We know that physical activity plays a key role in helping to prevent chronic disease. It's good for mental health, it's good for bone health, makes you feel good, good for your heart. The recommendations are 150 to 300 minutes of a moderate intensity physical activity every week, and then add on to that 2 days of muscle strengthening. And I'll share something a little bit personal with you tonight. I actually just started doing 2 days of muscle strengthening because I've been reading so much about it in preparation for these talks. And so it's something that we know it. We know that these things are good for us, but sometimes repeating the information to ourselves or reading it in different forms or hearing it from different people can help to reinforce and really kind of motivate us to actually make those changes. So we eat for pleasure and we eat to live. This was another one of our presentations that we did. Our bodies need about 40 different essential nutrients every day, and we get those essential nutrients from foods. And basically it's called essential nutrients because our bodies don't make them. We have to get them from an external source, and that would be food. So who can tell me the macronutrients? Or at least one of them. You don't have to say all of them. Oh, we got a winner in the front. Carbs, protein, and fats. And what about micronutrients? What are the 2 larger categories in micronutrients? Vitamins and minerals. Okay, we've got a winner in the front. So all of those things we can, oh yeah, and also I guess it is in your handout, isn't it? Yeah. Good point. So the micronutrients and macronutrients are essential for our bodies to be able to function at their best, at their peak, and to be able to ward off long-term diseases and chronic health conditions. Fiber, we talked a lot about fiber. Anybody in the room feel like they've been able to increase the amount of fiber in their diet based on some of the things that we've talked about and some of our suggestions? Good. Fiber is undigestible by you, but it feeds those buddies in your belly. So Dr. Faraci talked a lot about this and how instrumental fiber is in the role of your gut health. It's found in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Does anybody remember just seeing that on a previous slide? So those are all of the food groups that we need to try to increase in our diets. Most Americans don't get enough fiber. And when you're increasing your fiber, you want to make sure you're really drinking plenty of water. If you're not drinking plenty of water and you eat a lot of fiber, you can get some serious GI upset from that. So make sure that you're drinking your water. Nutrient-dense foods, I touched on this a little bit just a few minutes ago, but this is just basically your whole foods. It's going to be your whole fruits, your whole vegetables, your lean proteins, your lean cuts of meat, whole grains versus refined grains, remembering that at least half of your grains should be whole grains. Low-fat or fat-free dairy, and that can be from any source of dairy. It could be a plant dairy, it could be animal dairy, but shooting for the low-fat or fat-free versions of those will help you make sure that you're getting your calcium in a nutrient-dense way. And then oils like vegetable oil, olive oil, and the oils that are found naturally in foods like seafood. So we probably are all familiar with the fact that salmon and other fatty fish have oils that are naturally occurring in them. Those omega-3 fatty acids, and those are key to a lot of different sorts of health issues as well. So, are these nutrient-dense foods?
Absolutely not. No.
Trick question. No, they're not. So why aren't they nutrient-dense? Do they have any nutrients or any nutrition?
The eggs do. Well, they do have some.
Yeah. Yeah, they do have a little bit. Did I hear someone say that sprinkles have nutrition? No, the sprinkles don't have nutrition. But yes, absolutely. All foods that you eat, for the most part, have some level of nutrition. But when we talk about nutrient density, again, we're talking about a higher level of nutritional value for that food compared to the amount of calories and fat that you're getting from the food. So these would be considered, of course they're foods, but they would be considered nutrient poor foods. Take a look at the nutrition facts label, and does anybody know what food that is?
Maybe the color of the wrapper?
Shh. Oh, boy, you're getting all the answers today. It's Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Yeah. So again, if we look at the food label, the nutrition facts label, we can see that there's 3 servings per container. So that's one of those little pints. 3 servings, and each serving is 2/3 of a cup. If you eat the whole container, which, I'm not going to lie, I used to do that when I was in college. I don't do it anymore. But if you ate the whole thing, you're close to 1,000 calories just from the ice cream. But I would like to also point out, if you look down at your percentages of the vitamin D, calcium, and potassium, which are 3 of the nutrients of concern for the American population, it's got a little bit. I'm not going to say that that's like a good source of those nutrients. Actually, it is verging on a good source of calcium. It is a good source if you eat the whole container. However, again, caution about eating large quantities of food that have lots of calories in them. Maybe you do want to do that once in a while, and that may work out fine for you. We're going to be talking about that a little bit. Lexi will be talking about that coming up. Does anybody have any questions about this food label?
No, but I have a great alternative to that. You take some frozen fruit, and you take a little bit of your dairy beverage, whether it be almond milk, soy milk, or...
Okay, so you're going to take your frozen fruit and mix it with some kind of dairy beverage.
Yep. I have a NutriNinja, and it's got a smoothie. It's got a bowl where I can make smoothie type.
And you put it in a blender, either an individualized blender, but it has to really blend it right down, right? Like it has to be very...
It comes out nice and thick, almost just like ice cream, and it tastes really good, and it's a lot better than that.
Okay, that's a good alternative. That's a great idea. Thank you. So we know the dietary guidelines for Americans, right? We know that we should be eating more fruits and vegetables, and we know we should be eating more fiber, and we know we should be eating less saturated fat and added sugars and sodium. So what is getting in our way? What's the beef? What's going on? Yeah, why are we making these food choices? What do you guys think? What are some of your ideas? Taste, okay. Yeah. What were you going to say? Money, okay. Time. Yeah. Laziness. Yep.
Cravings in the processed foods.
Cravings for processed foods. Yes, cravings. That is a really good point. Yeah. Emotions. Very good. Yes, those are all legitimate. Holidays. Yes, holidays. Celebrations. Yes, exactly. So we'll talk, this is our introduction to diet and diet culture. Basically, diet culture is kind of this overarching umbrella that we live under in the United States. So whether you are really aware of it or not, the culture that surrounds us is a diet culture. So you probably have seen advertisements, many advertisements for different weight loss products, for different diets that can help you achieve a certain weight, size, and shape. Different kinds of supplements that you can take, different kinds of books that you can read, different kinds of exercise programs that maybe you can follow. All of these things fit under the umbrella of diet culture, which basically tells us that we're not good enough the way that we are, and we're going to sell you these products to fix you so that you can look like, XYZ, these models that are in in the photos here. I read an interesting statistic the other day, not statistic, but I read some interesting data about women models and actresses, and I think actually Jennifer Aniston was in this list of different actresses, showing what their height and their weight was and what their body mass index was. And for none of them was their body mass index within a healthy normal range. They were all under 19 for sure. And we know that a healthy body mass index is really critical for, especially as we get older, it's really critical for bone health and for keeping, just for overall health, to keep us healthy. So some of those body mass indexes could actually be considered, they meet the criteria for malnutrition. So one of the things that we have to be aware of is when we see things in the media, they're trying to sell us something. And so they're trying to sell us this idea that you should look this certain way, or you should lose weight, or you should exercise more, because this is what the expectation is in our culture.
I think it's worse now than it's ever been, because some very popular people like Oprah, like Marie Osborne, like Kelly Clarkson, so many people love her and watch her and like her singing. She's lost like 70 pounds in the last 6 months. So they're right in our faces now all the time.
Right.
And the drug she was on for the first that they've taken, I saw it yesterday on TV for the first time advertised for the general public.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think that it's more in our face now, and I think part of that is the social media and internet and just this constant stream of, you can go on your phone, or you can go on your computer, or you can go to the grocery store and stand in line, and the wacky things that you read and the conflicting information that you see on the front of the magazines. I was just in Hannaford the other day, and I saw something about accepting your body and intuitive eating, but then like the next thing said something about a diet, and then the next thing had a recipe for some kind of cake. And I'm like, this is so confusing. No wonder people are confused and just unhappy, really, because we're getting these messages that are just very confusing. So wellness culture, this is kind of a newer, how long would you say wellness culture has been? Maybe in the last 5 years or so?
5 to 10 years. I mean,
know.
It's getting more prolific.
Getting more prolific. Are you all familiar with wellness culture? No, not really?
Because Maine, the Maine magazine, right? They wanted me to do a presentation on wellness, and that was 2015. And they were trying to get me to promote supplements.
2015,
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I really don't get behind supplements. I said, if the patient has a diagnosed deficiency, which Dr. Faraci would be able to test, like vitamin D deficiency, we should be screening for that through the help of a PCP, and then if it's low, take it, and take it as advised, the proper dose, make sure it's being absorbed. To absorb vitamin D, you need some vitamin K, and you need magnesium. You can't just to have a balanced diet to get all those nutrients. And sometimes, what was that?
Oh, when you're done, I'll just.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I just want to, you already spoke to it, but when I look at those images, just name an emotion. What do you feel when you look at those pictures?
Inadequate.
Inadequate, right? I look at it, I feel ashamed. I can't climb a rock like that, and I'm a doctor. Right? Look at that. No way. Like, I'm supposed to be helped. No, I don't exercise nearly as great. And you go back to the previous slide. Same thing. Like, why can't I be that thin, right? It's you should be this way, and I feel shame. And this was eye-opening when you guys showed me the slide for the first time. Like, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. Diet culture, wellness culture. We got to be that well now too. Like, it's a mess with your mind, right?
So yes, the underlying message here is that the wellness culture, so we're starting to hear more about, do this, follow this special diet because it's going to make you healthy, or take these supplements because they're going to make you healthy. And it's really just a disguise, a pretty thinly veiled disguise if you look at it, for diet culture. So basically it's another way for business industries to get in there and get you to buy something. So just be aware that those messages are out there, and it's not about us. It's about somebody trying to make a buck. And I think that sometimes when we have that awareness that that's really what's happening, is that somebody's trying to sell us something, it can help to take away some of those feelings of inadequacy, or those feelings of shame or embarrassment about the way that our bodies look. So one thing we do know is that fad diets aren't the answer. And I think we talked about fad diets, didn't we, in one of our presentations? We talked about specifically what the fad diets were and how to spot one. I really don't see much out there nowadays that's not a fad diet. So you almost could blanketly say pretty much everything that you see in media is probably a fad diet. When weight loss becomes our goal, then we can get stuck in this diet cycle. So we're trying to lose weight, and then we can't do it, and then we cheat, and then we feel bad, and then we eat more, and then we gain the weight back, and then we say, oh, well, I have to go on a diet, and so we go back on a diet again, and then we, oh, it's so hard, I'm hungry all the time, and so then we cheat, or, oh, I don't like this food, or I can't stand eating meat all of the time, I'm tired of, just eating the same thing, and this diet cycle perpetuates, and it kind of goes around and around and around. And what we know is that people who lose weight when they're on these fad diets gain it back. Yep, and sometimes more. Sometimes gain more than what you lost to begin with. So that is another, yeah.
I just want to add that yo-yoing is actually contributing to hypertension and
Cardiovascular
diseases. So the ultimate goal is to maintain whatever you're able to lose for the rest of your life, because yo-yoing is what's contributing to the chronic disease, not just the weight, and potentially not the weight at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in some cases it may have just been you were better off to just stay the weight that you were. And, yeah, go ahead.
Can you define what yo-yoing is? Like, is it 5 pounds, like a little bit? Because I think we all fluctuate in our weight, right?
Yeah,
I don't
any
think
of the
that-
above.
Yeah.
Down 5, up 7. Down 9,
Oh,
up
it's so
15.
hard to stay
Down
right.
20, up 30. Yeah.
I think that yo-yo dieting, though, really, it's because you're intentionally trying to lose weight. I mean, if your weight naturally goes up and down, that's normal. That's a normal cycle. Maybe you gain a little weight in the wintertime, maybe you lose a little weight in the summer, just because that's a natural, flow for your body size and shape. But when you're intentionally trying to lose weight and you lose weight, and then you go off the diet and you gain it back, and then you intentionally go on a diet again to lose weight, that's the yo-yo dieting that we're talking about.
Not like
Yeah.
water retention, and
Correct.
you don't have the water retention.
Correct.
No,
Yeah,
from
exactly.
From morning to night, you can go up or down 3
Yeah.
pounds. That's a normal. That's,
Yeah.
We're plants. We're not rocks in terms of our body composition and our weights.
Right. Thank you.
So some facts about dieting. Fad diets promote a loss of internal signals for hunger and fullness that are necessary for normal eating. So when your brain takes over and doesn't listen to your stomach and the rest of your body telling you, hey, I've had enough to eat, or I'm really hungry right now, you're losing that innate ability that you have to determine what's enough and when you've had enough and when you need to eat. Diets can also contribute to food and body preoccupation. It can increase food cravings, and it distract you from other personal health goals. So sometimes by having that focus on the weight without having the focus on, okay, well, I just want to be more physically active, or I want to increase the amount of fruits and vegetables that I eat in my diet, or any of those other health goals, they can get lost if you're just really focused on the weight. Because you might not eat the fruit because somebody told you that fruit has a lot of sugar in it and you shouldn't be eating it. So it's important if you keep your eye on the health prize, which is really how you feel, how your body moves, how your labs look, the way that you're able to be physically active. If you're listening to your hunger cues and your body is telling you when you need to eat and you're stopping when it tells you to stop. I'm not really good at that, but and a lot of us aren't. So those are just some facts about dieting. here are a couple common food rules that we should reject. And I'm wondering if you all have any other food rules that you either have heard people say or maybe you've internalized and they're kind of your own food rules that you're now realizing, oh shoot, that's a food rule. I don't really need that as part of my life. Does anybody want to share any of the ones that you might have heard or anything that's new?
Finishing everything on your plate.
Got to finish everything on your plate. Oh my gosh. Yep. Go ahead.
What about intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fast. I can't eat at a certain time. I can't eat, I have to stop eating at a certain time and I can't eat after a certain time. Yep, that's a food rule. Anybody else?
I've read or heard several times, coffee makes you lose weight. You can drink more coffee, or if you don't drink as much coffee, you lose weight.
Conflicting stuff, yeah. So drink more coffee to lose weight or stop drinking coffee to lose weight. Okay? Yeah, that's actually a really good clue that it's a food rule. If you hear, two different opposing thoughts, like for example, maybe 20 years ago, eggs were bad. Does that sound about right, 20 years ago? So, and then, no, eggs are good. Now, that's not necessarily a food rule. That's more based in scientific literature. But when you start seeing these, like, this food is bad, a demonization of a particular food or a particular food group, those are food rules, and they should be challenged. Ask questions. Maybe it's a good food rule. I don't know. But it's a good time to really think critically about whether that's a food rule that is right for you. Is it true? Is it reasonable? Is it something that's going to help you meet your health goals? Or maybe you don't need a food rule. Just putting it out there. So I think this is the part where we're going to have a stretch break and we're going to move into the food demo. Allison's going to show you how that chia pudding was made. And we also have some samples of fruit and yogurt parfaits some have granola, some don't have granola. We weren't able to find a gluten-free granola. So if you need gluten-free, you can have one that doesn't have the granola on it. And hopefully you all saved your spoons. And you can use your spoon for the yogurt parfait. It's a one-layer parfait. It's not really a multiple-layer parfait, but you could do that at home, especially if you had a fancy glass to put it in or something where you can see the different layers. But we have these plain bowls, so you get a one-layer parfait here.
I got this recipe from this cookbook here. It's called the Anti-Inflammatory Meal Prep Guide by Ginger Holton. She's a cancer dietitian that has just does private practice now, and I really enjoyed her cookbook. It was very helpful, very, very thoughtfully laid out, so that you know what to shop for and have shopping lists, etc. So, but I agreed with you guys. It wasn't sweet enough. The original recipe called for 2 tablespoons of the maple syrup, and I put 3 tablespoons of the maple syrup in so that it would taste sweet enough to me. So that's the nice thing, like when you bring this recipe home, if you feel like you want it more chocolatey, add a little more of the cocoa powder. Yeah. All right, well, let's get started.
What about cow's milk? Have you tried it with cow's milk?
I have not, no. And you could, if you can digest milk and dairy, you could use cow's milk, you could use almond milk, you could use oat milk, you could use soy milk. So whichever flavor or style of milk that you prefer is acceptable and a great idea, because milk gives you electrolytes and B vitamins and calcium and protein, so cow's milk. And so the others have to be fortified to be quite as nutritious as the cow milk does. Oh, and there was somebody in the group that brought up, if you're making whole wheat bread, which I brought this in. This is from, it's called Maine grains, so it's in northern Maine, and it is free of pesticide use, unlike like a King Arthur flour, which may or may not have been exposed to some of the Roundup Ready that gets sprayed on crops that are grown right next to the wheat in the United States. So that's a kind of a trendy thing that's I'm noticing more and more of people. There's a fellow at the farmer's market that sells homemade bread, and he makes it using Maine grains. And so the comment from the group, or from somebody in the group, was that when you're making whole wheat bread, to make it more tender and so that it's not quite so dense and rugged, to add more water. So traditionally, when you're making bread, you have to knead it until it gets to a smooth consistency on the top, and he recommended you add a little extra water to the mix, even if it's tacky at the top, that way it will be a little bit more tender and you may enjoy the texture better. So I thought I would share that with the group. And then another woman brought in some Post cereal that was very low in sugar. So this was one product that I could get behind too. It was very low sugar, high fiber. And then another product for crackers. And she did a great job label reading. You know, she found the ones with a few ingredients where she could recognize the names that were low in added salt, low in added sugar, high in fiber. All right, so now let's get started. So chocolate chia seed pudding. 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder, and it calls for a half a cup of chia seeds. I learned from making it a couple times that if you blend the cocoa powder with the chia seeds, then the cocoa powder doesn't float quite as much. So.
Is there anything you could substitute for the chia?
Not that would thicken the way that it does.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the key. I think you could try flax, because I know Dr. Howe does a class where he thickens, he makes a fake egg, and you boil crushed flax and water, and when it comes to a boil, it'll get to like a kind of like an egg yolk and egg white consistency.
What if you don't care for flaxseed or chia seeds?
You could, I mean, yeah, you could do chocolate pudding and then just put fruit into it. I mean, I suppose, you know, because chocolate pudding can be a healthy food. It's made with milk, and milk isn't bad for us. It does have a lot more sugar in it than something like this with only 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder. So here we'll start the 1/2 cup of the chia seed. Three tablespoons of cocoa powder.
The thing that's great about this pudding is what Dr. Faraci said about the fiber. It's really high fiber. Is it 9 grams per? I think it's 9 grams per serving. You wouldn't find that same level of fiber in a regular chocolate pudding, but a chocolate pudding made with low-fat or non-fat milk and cornstarch, if you make it from scratch at home, that absolutely would be considered a more nutritious alternative for a dessert. So the chia seed is just, it's cool that it has this capability of absorbing liquid and making it into a pudding texture, and then it has that added benefit of all of the extra fiber.
When I was thinking about it, I wondered too, do you get more vitamins and minerals if the chia is crushed the way that the flax is? I would imagine you may, but I know there's still quite a bit of fiber whether it's crushed or not.
Just chew it.
Yeah, right? Use your teeth. As we talked about at the beginning, that's like the first step of digestion, is to expose the surface of all the carbohydrate to amylase, the compound that's in your mouth that's going to help you break down all that carbohydrate.
What's the question?
What's the question? Oh, cacao?
That is what that is, the cacao. There's not a lot of sweetness. It's very bitter. So that's why, you know, we might put in, you can start with a tablespoon of the maple syrup instead of 3 and see if you notice the sweetness, because obviously 1 tablespoon is better than 3 tablespoons when it comes to pure sugar.
And all of this is in your handout, including the how good is it in the refrigerator, that's all on the recipe list here.
So that's really about it. In about 30 minutes or so, this becomes the consistency of this. So you can see it just thickens right up. Within a half an hour, it's about half that thickness, and within an hour of being chilled, it's that full thickness.
Can you blend the chia seeds with the cocoa powder to make sure so that it's not as...
Oh, like if you put it into a food processor, you mean, just to really get all of the surface? Yes, I suppose you could. Yeah. So yeah, that's chia seed pudding. Oh, and then I topped it with some raspberries and then some fresh unsweetened coconut. And then speaking of whole grains, I just thought I would bring in teff. Teff is a type of whole grain that Lexi and I both have tried. It's just a hot cereal. It's considered an ancient grain because it's kind of like oatmeal or cream of rice, but it's dark colored, sort of like the way that quinoa is. And you can make it into a pilaf, so you'd use extra water, and then you would, but it looks like, I don't know if people can see it from there without the camera, but
Is teff gluten-free?
it's gluten-free, yeah. Yeah.
What's the name of it?
TEFF, I'd never heard of it. It's from Ethiopia. And a friend of mine told me about it, and I tried it, and I was really intrigued, and it's delicious, and you can use it, again, like use extra water and then boil it, and it'll come up, fluff up like rice or a pilaf. But if you want it like a hot cereal, you just use less water, and then you can put a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on it if you want for breakfast with fruit. And then just earlier we were saying with the chia pudding, it could lend itself to adding things like a little bit of rolled oats or a little bit of flaxseed, and you could have it as a breakfast item, maybe doing it as a vanilla version instead of the chocolate version. There's vanilla almond chia seed puddings on the internet that you can find recipes for as well. Yeah.
So the flaxseed versus the ground flax, is that going to make it more of the egg-like texture?
Yes. Yes. Yep.
I want to say one comment as well, because obviously this is not for everybody's taste buds, and that's okay, right? There are other recipes out there, other ways to get fiber. But I also just want to put in a plug that our taste buds do change with time. You know, we know that the more we expose ourselves to a food, the more likely you are to start liking that food. So you may not have liked it, but after you have it a couple times, you may start to like it next year. Now you guys are old enough that you don't have to go try the food on your plate like our little kids do. I take care of kids as well as adults, and so when I've got my 6-month-old trying food for the first time, that's the #1 lesson I tell the parents, is put as much different type of foods on that plate as possible. We've got good evidence that the more they try, the less picky they will be on later in life. Now that's a little harder for us to do, but they have studied it. There was, it's not really a randomized controlled trial, but one individual was one of these foodies, went all over the world and ate crazy foods, bugs and chocolate and all that kind of stuff. But he had his list of 10 foods that he would never eat, disgusting, even he wouldn't eat them. And then he challenged himself, and for a full, I think it was 3 months or something, he ate those foods every day. He tortured himself, essentially, because he hated them. And at the end of those 3 months, he actually liked 5 of the foods on his hate list. He had learned how to like them. And he was like, these are the 10 foods he couldn't eat, and even he learned to like them. So forced exposure, if you're willing to do that to yourself. You do not have to. You are not 6 months old. You don't have to eat what your parents put on your plate anymore. But that is something, after reading this, making this lecture and learning all this stuff a couple years ago, I have forced myself, and I now enjoy brown rice and brown pasta. I did it. So can you.
Yeah, this is a resource, another resource, Food for Thought by Lisa Goller. And that's exactly what she speaks to, is that you will start craving the foods that you start eating more of naturally. It's fascinating, and she thinks it has to do with the gut biome, that those gut biomes, the little cells, microbes, are actually releasing compounds that are making us want a certain food so that they can stay alive, which I just find so sci-fi, but it's all, they're not randomized controlled trials, but there's some information from really good science about that.
Okay, so my turn now. Got just 2 or 3 slides, not very much. So who here has heard, and hang on, I gotta hover near this microphone because I'm not plugged in right now.
Oh, I was going to stand next to you, too.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, stand next to me. There we go. All right, who has heard of the health at every size movement? Okay, 1 or 2 hands, but not a lot. This is a growing movement the last few years, and I am proud to say they're starting to teach it in some medical schools a little bit. So hopefully doctors will become a little more savvy at this. But in short, it's saying that you can have health at pretty much every size. This is a growing movement that's very much in tune with the message that we're trying to give in this talk, is that health is not just about the fad diet or that the magazines and all that stuff, right? There is so much more to health. And there are people who are, in the stereotypical way or the fad diet would have you believe are unhealthy or too big, and they are actually very healthy. Some of them are healthier and exercise more than I do. And I don't exercise that much, so that's not hard to beat. I gotta work on that. That's why I'm doing the walk with the doc. So really getting more inclusive, defining what is a healthy body and learning to embrace that part of who we are, because so much of our culture is so shame-based when it comes to weight. You know, it is, when somebody comes into my clinic and weight comes up, you know, I'm a doctor and that does come up, about half the time people start crying. Like, it is that sensitive of a topic. And so I'm really careful with how I ask permission. Hey, do you want to talk about weight? You know, oftentimes they bring it up, but if they don't, I ask permission, and we, talk about the whole space. Multiple times today, even try to dispel some of the myths about a BMI or a weight target and all that stuff. And this movement is really important to talk to some of that. I'll go on to the next slide has the details. So what is healthy? Healthy, I mean, your doctor will mention at some point a lower weight is good for you, but that is only one small piece of the puzzle, and sometimes it's not actually a piece of the puzzle. So you should not put that first and foremost. Weight targets, even when I'm doing a weight loss drug, I tell people do not set a weight target, because you're gonna miss it or just be shy of it, and you're gonna feel like a failure, and that's just gonna perpetuate that cycle. So do the best you can to not set a weight target. When I do my analogies and I'm talking to patients, I say, I want to look under the hood. Yeah, here's your BMI and here's your weight, but let's get that blood work. What is your A1C? Are you pre-diabetic? What's your cholesterol level? Do you have fatty liver? These are the things that we actually care about, because that'll lead to disease and then illness. And that's far more important than the number on the scale. Now, doctors are correct. As the weight goes up, we do tend to see more prediabetes, more fatty liver, more cholesterol problems, but it is not a one-to-one correlation. There are a lot of people who are heavy and are not having that problems. And it's complex. Yes, there's genetics. I've got some people who are skinny and have fatty liver, and that's just their genetics, and sorry, that's just the way you were born, and thanks mom and dad kind of stuff. But a lot of it is everything that we're teaching. If you are eating the right stuff, doing the right exercise, your metabolic parameters are gone down, but you've only lost 2 pounds, we need to learn how to celebrate that. We should not feel, look at that fad diet magazine and feel ashamed about that, because that matters more as the overall under the hood health there. And that's really what the slide is saying, is look at that blood pressure, blood cholesterol, dietary pattern, sleep patterns, stress, friendships. Some of these bad diets and diet cycles are leading to so much, literally people breaking down in tears, having emotional binge eating episodes, and it can cause so much more harm when we really start focusing on weight too much. Some fun facts about BMI. So I try to dispel this myth in most of my patient visits. The body mass index, BMI, is a measure of your weight in your kilograms, and you do some squaring. It's a fairly simple calculation. But fun fact, who knows where BMI came from? Like, who eventually coined this? It was not a doctor. It was not a randomized control trial. It was not done, it actually was back in the 1800s of a bunch of white military men in the Scottish Highlands and a couple French policemen.
There's 12 of them.
I couldn't find the 12 statistic. I'm not sure the 12 men is correct, but we're talking like less than 1,000 men for sure, of only those very specific young white military men. How many people here are young white military men from the Scottish Highlands? There we go, right? So one could argue this BMI criteria doesn't actually apply to really any of us. And even when in the 1900s people went and did larger studies and kind of counted and calculated averages, they mostly held true to the original BMI calculations and standards. And again, the repeat studies did not look at women, did not look at people of color, did not look at older age. So this is really a crappy criteria to use to really think about yourself. We are unfortunately stuck with it. Even patients today, I had to think about the BMI number, because that's going to go to the insurance company and see if X or Y gets approved, and see if you get to see the dietitian, because that has to go through the insurance company. So we play their games, and I put it in your chart, but don't take it to heart. Really do not take it to heart. If you love numbers, because some people are very numbers oriented, I'm kind of one of them as well, technically the evidence-based number is a waist circumference. You get out your measuring ruler and you measure your waist circumference. However, that feels really judgy, and I do not regularly measure my patient's waist circumference, but if you want a number, that's the one that's more evidence-based, because it's looking at the abdominal visceral fat and some consequences that come from that. See these 2 people on the screen? They both have a BMI of 35. And one of us on a quick look would say one is probably, well, maybe that's a little too jacked, but one is maybe a little healthier than the other, right? And they both have a BMI of 35. Now, if you don't remember off the top, I deal with BMI all day long, but BMI of under 17 is way too low. That's anorexia territory. 18 to 19 is low. There are some people who naturally hang out there, but 20 to 25 is sort of the generally accepted sort of happy range. 25 to 30 is classified as overweight. I always make sure to do air quotes when I say that, overweight, but it's often not. That's just sort of happily where you are. 30 to 35, or anything above 30 we start calling obese, and then you get to above 40 is severe obesity, and is it with or without medical comorbidities. But honestly, throw all that away. I'd say in general, if your BMI is greater than 40, I do start to see health consequences. There's not a lot of people with a BMI of greater than 40 that are really pulling off the healthy at every size, but there are a couple people who are. And then that anywhere from BMI to really 18 to 40, you need to focus less on the number and more on the how you are living here. Again, there is some moderate correlation with these metabolic disease outcomes, but it is not a one-to-one. And this is where the medical system and the insurance complex really is failing people, because I have patients, multiple patients this year, who come in and they're floridly diabetic, didn't know it. And I have a long talk with them, they hop on the horse, they start exercising, they're eating right, and they do everything great, and their A1C, several patients actually dropped from like 12 all the way down to 5.6 or 6.1. So they put their diabetes into remission. Usually I have to do medications to do that. So they came in and I was ecstatic. Wow, great job, you did it. You got this down, you're eating the right food, you're exercising. And both of those patients that I'm thinking about right now were near tears in the office. These are a fully grown adult men saying, I failed. It's what do you mean you failed? Well, I only lost 5 pounds. It's well, only lost 5. I mean, yes, they are still obese by BMI criteria, but you put your diabetes into remission and you feel like a failure. I try to talk them up, but you can only do what you can do, right? I'm trying to undo 30 years of societal expectations. You can only do so much, and that's a failure of our expectations. But for them, that BMI wasn't as important as that under the hood look, right? Looking at their prediabetes. And then I have a few unfortunate individuals who are doing everything right, and they're only 2 pounds overweight on the BMI criteria, or even normal weight, and they still have prediabetes. And I say, I'm sorry, you just got a bad set of genes, and that's where I come in. I got medications to help you there. So that's my slides. Let's pass it over.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to talk about mindful eating and intuitive eating. And really, if we were doing this correct by the founders, we would have never talked about all of the rules that we've shared with you. So know that this might be a little bit confusing, but as Lori pointed out to you, the diet culture and our wellness culture and this BMI weight, if you will, that we carry with us that really tells us we're not healthy and we're not good enough, those are really what can get in the way of us eating and making the choices that we have been sharing with you. And so what intuitive eating is, well, we'll get into this, but mindful eating and intuitive eating are 2 different concepts, but they do have a lot of similarities. So we're going to talk about both. So eating mindfully. This means you are using all your physical and emotional senses to experience and enjoy the food choices that you make. So this is a great picture. Is your mind full? Are you distracted? Are you busy and doing other things? Or are you actually in the moment of eating and enjoying your food? So the practices of mindful eating. Number 1, honor the food. Where it was grown, how it was prepared. Engage all those senses. What does it sound like? Actually, we're going to be passing around some samples right now, and don't eat those samples because we're going to do a exercise. So while I'm talking, those will go around so we can do it together as I get to that part of the presentation. So again, engaging all those senses. What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What are the colors of the food that we're eating? The tastes, those textures.
What about taking small bites and chewing thoroughly so we can experience all those flavors? Eating slowly, that can help us to recognize when we start to feel satisfied. And don't skip meals. I have so many people come into my office who skip meals and they think that they're part of and helpful to dieting, and I have to tell you, it does the exact opposite. And so it is very important that you do not skip meals. And now let's see if I can get my video here. When you actually practice some of what we're talking about, it can start to resonate. Because as I'm talking to you right now, it's information, it's kind of going in, but hopefully you can take this information and apply it. And when we start to talk about the psychological pieces that go along with food, this is not something that's like, oh, I just have to eat more fiber. Okay, tomorrow I'll go buy, some things at the grocery store, higher fiber, and that's all you need to do. I mean, this can take years to master. And as an intuitive eater, I still find myself being distracted or not being prepared. I mean, we'll talk more about it, but this is not an easy, you're gonna get it tomorrow, and hopefully you're gonna recognize when some of that diet culture is what we're gonna talk about all of this, but so now let's watch this video. So I guess you all know what the exercise is. You all have apples in front of you. And we actually you should have 3 different varieties of apples. We have Macintosh, what do we have? Red Delicious, and Granny Smith. So isn't the Macintosh Granny Smith? Oh, it's a different one. Okay, so there you go. So what we want you to do is to take a few minutes and try a bite. Look at each piece of apple that you have. And this is going to be a little bit maybe foreign because it's not typically how a lot of us eat. Any comments? What do you guys think? What about, which one do you like? Are they different? Some should be more crunchy.
As soon as I saw the Granny Smith, I said salivating. I know that's going to be sour.
Mm-hmm.
And it is.
The Granny Smith is sour.
I knew it when I saw it. I already started.
She was saying that before she even tasted the Granny Smith, she already felt her mouth watering and knowing it was going to be sour.
Whoa. So does this mean you shouldn't be reading the paper in the morning when you're eating?
Mindful eating, well, here I am eating with my mouth full. I mean talking. Mindful eating and intuitive eating would recommend that you do not eat while you're distracted and focus on the meal. I've been trying to do that with my lunch break, and it's very hard. It's very hard. We live very busy lives. Yes?
I also took a course once where we ate 20 of us in community without saying anything. And that happened so many, it was really fascinating to just sit quietly with other people that you would naturally be talking with, because you did enjoy your food differently, you noticed your food differently. I felt like preparing my meal to eat with others, I prepared my meal differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't going to be talking. So just like the story of the food, I don't know, it's just...
Mm-hmm. She was saying that when she was at an event, she was eating on her own completely. Eating quietly with the group, and that whole experience was very different. And the way that you prepared your food and your connection with what you were eating was probably more intense. Or it's a great thing, and this is part of, like, it is kind of a meditation, which we've all heard. The wellness culture can play into that too. Are you meditating enough? Are you doing all these things enough? But there is a lot of value in and we're going to talk more about that. That's a big piece about intuitive eating. But does anybody have anything else to share about the apple samples? Yes.
The apple samples, but eating with chopsticks slows you down.
Oh.
You
Yes.
taste your food. You have to get, it's a completely different way of eating, and it's really more enjoyable.
Eating with chopsticks can definitely be a way to slow you down. The one caveat I would just put out with that, and with all of these things, is make sure these aren't more rules so that you're not eating what you actually need to nourish your body. If you're using the chopsticks to enjoy and experience the food, perfect. If you're using the chopsticks because you're trying to limit your calorie intake, now you're creating more rules, and you are thinking about other kind of other things that are kind of getting in the way, and I'm going to get into that. So, intuitive eating. So the founders of intuitive eating are Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. And this book is, if it's not yet, it will be available in our library here. There's a lot of different books and information out there on intuitive eating, but again, it can get sold and get kind of caught up into that $60 billion diet culture. And so if this is connected to a diet, it's the wrong one. So I definitely recommend the founders. But intuitive eating, it's not a diet. It doesn't promise weight loss, even if you've mastered it. What it does and what it wants to do is reconnect your trust in your own body. It integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought with eating. And it honors health by gaining attunement with body's individual physical and emotional needs. So what is attunement and interoception? Body attunement is using the direct experience of your body, listening and responding to your body's needs. And we'll talk about some of those different cues that your body gives you. But those can be things like changes in heart rate, feeling your full bladder, when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling hungry, and when you're feeling satisfied. And I will say that I have a lot of people who come into our office and they don't know what hunger or fullness feels like. So just think about that, whether or not you're in tune with those feelings. What does hunger feel like? Hunger can be in the stomach. So your stomach can start rumbling. It can start growling or kind of gnawing at you. Can feel like gurgling or just an emptiness. You can feel it in your mouth and your throat and your esophagus, like a watering or a dull ache or, again, that gnawing. You can start to feel hunger in your head. Maybe you're getting a little bit cloudy thoughts, lightheaded, headache. It's difficult to focus or concentrate, or maybe you're just thinking about food. That's a sign you're hungry too. We can feel hunger like in our mood. We can start to get cranky or irritable. And energy levels can definitely go down when when we haven't eaten enough. Or just when we feel like apathetic or just kind of numb, we're not there. That can be hunger too. What about primal hunger? Now, this is also known as hangry, and we used to joke my brother got very hangry very often, but when we let ourselves get to this point, this is when we can often overeat. And so this can lead to a binge. This can lead to poor dietary choices that you may not have wanted to make. And so intuitive eating really encourage us to never ever get to this point. This is kind of like a high risk zone. What about fullness? Are you feeling more relaxed and pleasant? And you have fewer thoughts about food and eating when you're full? Or are you feeling heavy, bloated, sick? I had a person in my office just the other day, and she told me fullness feels like nausea. And so she's really struggling to get more in tune with what fullness feels like. And so this is the hunger scale. And you all have a hunger scale in your packets. And this hunger scale is kind of showing that there's a real range of hunger and fullness. And when we feel hunger, we should be eating. So we should be eating when we're in that hungry zone, not very hungry, not starving, primal hunger. And then there's also those different feelings of feeling kind of satisfied and somewhat full. And this hunger scale, the purpose of this is something that you can start to pay more attention to and check in with yourself frequently to see where you are on that hunger scale. So with intuitive eating, kind of the touchstone of intuitive eating is satisfaction. And so when we eat without diet and wellness noise, we're free to listen to our bodies and discover satisfaction. We can then start to enjoy regular physical movement because it feels good. It's not, the purpose for an end to, weight loss or to work off some calories that we were eating. We do it because it's satisfying. It feels good. And we start to listen and satisfy our cravings. So when we tell ourselves we can't eat that cookie, oh gosh, I can't eat a cookie, that's terrible, that's bad food, or the donut, or heaven forbid you eat the Haagen-Dazs that we pointed out earlier. Those foods, if we keep them off limit, what intuitive eating tells us is that we're gonna crave those foods more. That those foods are going to become almost like, prizes that we will seek out. And, we don't want to eat the ice cream, so we have, maybe the chia pudding. And that wasn't really gonna do it. So then we have, a piece of fruit. Oh, look at us, we're having a piece of fruit. And then we have, maybe, something else, and it all gets stacked on top of each other. And eventually, you've eaten way more calories had you just had the cookie. So that's part of this intuitive eating, is just really honoring those cravings. And this really goes against a lot of those things that we talked about with all the rules, with the dietary guidelines, and it can feel a little bit confusing, but the idea, again, is to get more in touch with our body. If you want that cookie, then you can have that cookie. Yes, question?
What about don't skip meals? So you're saying here, if we're going to eat this way, there's no set 3 meals a day. You're just going to eat when you're hungry.
Yeah, I mean, so the question is, we said don't skip meals. And yes, it's very important not to skip meals, but if you're not feeling hungry, don't force yourself to eat, of course not. But what often happens is people, I see this a lot, well, I didn't eat breakfast. I had coffee for breakfast. And then I had coffee, when I started to feel hungry. And then lunchtime, oh, I ate a salad. That was really great. Look at me. And then, dinner comes around and, oh, yeah, we're really good. We follow my plate for dinner. We have, a starch, protein, a grain, a whole grain, or I said that, vegetable, fruit, milk. We did it all. But gosh, at the end of the day, I just can't handle myself, and, I just feel so stressed. I ate the whole bag of chips, and I ate a brownie, and then, I don't know, maybe I had a glass of wine, or maybe 3. And I have to tell people, you skipped breakfast, and you ate a really small lunch. So where you're getting the breakfast and lunch is in the evening because you tried not to eat all day. So you don't force yourself to eat, but ask yourself if you're hungry. And if you're not eating, are you not eating because you're not hungry, or are you not eating because those food rules are coming into play? And we'll talk more about that. So satiety, there is some value here, and this, is some information. But there are foods that contribute to satiety. Satiety is that feeling of satisfied and being basically content, and the staying power of what you're eating. For me, if I eat oatmeal for breakfast, I'm starving a half an hour later. That's me. But other people tell me, oh, when they eat oatmeal, it's a great food and it can really last for a long time. So there is some individual information here, or individualized information that you have to get from yourself about what provides staying power for the foods that you're eating. But in general, protein, it triggers those satiety hormones, so it helps you to kind of start to feel full. Fats are slow to digest, so they can, make us feel full as well. And carbohydrates with fiber, they add bulk and they're slower to absorb. So information there. And there is, recommendations to combine some of these macronutrients. But again, I'm trying to unpack all the rules and kind of not have those rules, just this is a little bit of information. So attunement disruptors. So this goes back to that diet culture piece. And this is really anything that interferes with your ability to hear and respond to the needs of your body in a timely manner. So distractions can be things like phones or TV. So this is where the mindful eating piece can have a good connection here. Thoughts about body dysmorphia, shame, guilt. This is a big one. This is one little bullet point on a slide, but this one hits really hard. But when we think about, oh gosh, I'm so XYZ, I gotta fit into that dress next week, or even if your closet's full of foods that you don't necessarily fit into anymore, all of that information just makes you feel really bad and guilty and shameful. And if you feel like when you're eating you have a lot of this information in your head, that can be That is definitely an attunement disruptor. And as a reminder, attunement is getting in touch with your own body and your own needs and your own, how your body's communicating with you. Rules, good foods, bad foods, can't eat that, that's bad. Oh, that's so bad. Oh, look at me, I'm being so good. Or, oh, today I'm on my diet and I'm following everything perfectly. Oh, but today's a cheat day, and so now I can eat anything I want. And so now, oh gosh, I can't have another cheat day because then I'm bad again. I mean, these are all the things that can go into our heads. So just maybe start to think about, if you need to keep a journal, how often all of that noise is playing into your mealtime and your thoughts about yourself. And lack of self-care. So inadequate sleep. If you ever come into the office, we are always asking, how much sleep do you get a night? Which isn't really related to nutrition, but it's very much related to nutrition and your overall health and well-being. And stress. Stress is another big one. But so I have a note here, and we didn't put it on our slide, but we need to do another little stretch break. But now's probably a good time. We're going to do an activity after, so we'll have a little stretch break, and if anybody has to go to the bathroom, and then we'll do an exercise. So as I said, we're going to do a little activity. We're going to try to perceive our own heart rate. This is like a meditation. So Dr. Faraci can share maybe, yeah.
Happy to jump in. So if you've ever learned how to check your pulse, you put out your hand, and on your thumb side and your pinky side, I want you to look at your thumb side. And right there is our radial artery. And if you use, usually we say 2 fingers. Don't check with your thumb, because your thumb has its own pulse. So if you put your thumb on your wrist, you'll just feel your thumb's pulse, and it gets kind of confusing. But you get those 2 fingers, usually the first and second fingers, and you put them, you can model there, on that right there. And it's kind of in between the groove. It's not all the way on the side. And then just hold it there, light pressure, not too hard, and you might start to feel a little boom, 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 moving pulse. Now, most of you, if that's hard, you can also do the wrap your hand around your wrist technique. Sometimes that gets into a better place, and you can find it a little easier that way as well. It took me a while to learn how to find my pulse the first time in medical school. If that's not quite for you, it's a little easier to feel in your carotids. That's another place. Some people might be a little bit harder. You kind of find into the notch, you dig a little deep and feel the stronger pulse there, but it's a little deeper, hard to feel. If we're looking for the much easier way, if you can't find the radial pulse, you can't find your carotid pulse, just take your whole hand and just under, if you're a woman, under your left breast, but even just on the left side of the chest, you put that whole hand and tuck it up there. And then just sit, kind of hunch over a little bit. And that's an area called the PMI, the point of maximal impulse, where when the heart beats, it kind of thuds against the chest wall a little bit. And if you're really still and really quiet, you can actually feel that very gentle thudding. So if either you can't find it, or maybe the radial pulse is too boring or too easy, try to find your PMI. You have to be a lot quieter and really feel for that in your body. Those are things for body attunement.
So we're just going to do that for 30 seconds. Okay, now another 30 seconds. See if you can feel your heart rate without touching your body at all. Anybody able to feel? You could feel it in your temples, yet? You could feel it in your chest. That's building your body attunement. That's getting more in tune with your own body. And If you want to continue to build upon that, you can set aside 5 minutes every day and just sort of see if you can feel or sense your heart rate. So how to apply some of this information that we've been talking about? The recommendation is that you use that hunger scale from the moment you wake up and check in with yourself and see, how are you feeling? Are you hungry? And if you are hungry, you should be eating. And when you are, when you're feeling hungry, what do you feel like eating? You know, are you eating non-fat yogurt and blueberries because that's what you love, or is that what your diet tells you you're supposed to be eating? Are you eating a plain chicken breast because you love it, or because your diet tells you that's what you're, supposed to be eating? And this might all seem a little bit confusing because we've been talking so much about, the dietary guidelines, but we will get there, and just know that as you start to honor your hunger and honor, those cravings and getting more in tune with that satisfaction piece, the nutrition will naturally follow. And so what people often find is, oh, I ate that whole bag of chips and I have a problem with chips, and chips are, my vice or whatever. But then when they start eating breakfast and getting more in tune with the foods that they like, they're like, I don't even like chips. I don't know why I was eating them. But you were probably eating them because you were hungry, and you were probably eating them because those food rules were really getting in the way. So the other piece is being prepared. And this is another one when people come into the office that can really get in the way. When Lori and I were talking about kind of some of those tools that you can use, about like bringing a lunch bag with you, and making a grocery list, and going to the grocery store, and making sure you have food in your house. This can be hard to do for some people. So know that the being prepared part is, if you're feeling hungry and you feel like eating something that's not in your fridge, well, then that's, you're not really prepared. So that's what that's all about. And having a variety of foods, like I said. And then, experiencing all those sensory aspects of the food while eating. So you guys have a picture of a tongue in your book. And actually, Dr. Faraci shared that is actually not really valid information. We've learned that forever. We don't actually have taste buds in specific locations on our tongues. So I removed that, but just know that the idea is just to experience all those flavors, not so much where they are located. Umami. Umami is a taste. It's kind of like that savory taste. Umami is like I think soy sauce is a good example of umami. Maybe a ham is a good example of umami.
I can talk. So the taste buds on the tongue, the science behind it is that we have more taste buds on the side and the tip of our tongue. So you can play with that as a mindfulness exercise as well, is take a food and try putting it in the center of your tongue, and you don't taste it really as much. And then try it on the tip of your tongue, and oh, there's a difference. Think about how we chew, right? We chew with our teeth, and that's touching the side of our tongue, so it makes more sense that the taste buds would be concentrated there. But you can taste bitter in all of the side and tip, umami, the side and tip. So the taste buds are everywhere, it's just on the edges that you taste the best.
And then that umame is all of them. It's a Japanese term, and it means that it's hitting all of those receptors.
So we're talking about how to apply this information. The next piece of intuitive eating says we need to make peace with food. We need to make our choices emotionally equal without placing shame or judgment on them. You're not a good or bad person because of what you ate. That really has no correlation there whatsoever. And when we give ourselves permission to eat what we like, it allows us to experience and taste the effect of the food in our body. So maybe, do I really like this food? Do I like how it feels in my body? Would I choose to eat it again? I ask my kids that a lot. Like, they have, certain foods that they want to eat that that their friends are eating, and that are readily available, and we will eat it, and then we will say, how did that feel? And that's a connection. So start to make those connections with how it feels. Challenge the food police. When you're shopping, preparing, eating foods, what are you thinking and telling yourself about the food? Is there scientific evidence to support the thought? Reframe those negative thoughts and negative self-talk into positive self-talk. So, I can't eat bread. Bread is bad. Carbs are bad. Oh, but when I eat a sandwich with bread at lunch, wow, I have more energy and I feel good. And at the end of the day, I want to go for a walk. So, was the carb really bad, or did the food rules get stuck in our head and kind of, contribute to that lack of body attunement? Respect your body. Respecting your body means treating it with dignity and kindness and meeting its basic needs. You don't have to necessarily love your body. We already found out that, those models that are on the covers are all malnourished, and we're not gonna look like them. So it's very hard to, not have that information impact us, but you can cultivate habits that are kind and respectful towards our bodies. So we may not love our body, but we can treat it with kindness. We can be good to our body. We can value all, we can basically have gratitude for all of the things that our body gives to us. And practicing self-care. So the easy things like brushing our teeth, flossing, showering, moving our body, including nutritious foods, restorative sleep, all of those things, that's part of our self-care. Stop body checking. Stop. Some people, I tell them, I'm like, you need to throw away your scale because it's not helping. And maybe you need to throw away your mirror. Maybe that's not helping. Maybe all the clothes in your closet I was kind of mentioning that don't fit you anymore, maybe those aren't helping. And stop comparing yourself to others. So this is a big one. Coping with feelings without food. This is a big one, and I hear so often. I use food, and I talked about this earlier. I use food to self-soothe, and there is certainly food can be nourishing and can be soothing to us. But if we're listening to our body, if we're not restricting, there's a big connection between emotional eating and deprivation. And that piece I see a lot. So the deprivation piece, not eating breakfast, not eating lunch, that can all lead to the emotional eating at night. So it feels like emotional eating, and you might be experiencing a stressful moment, but you're coming into that moment starving. And so that's really not going to help you to be able to cope with those feelings when you're starving. So as it says here, if you're presented with difficult emotions at a time when you're hungry or worse, starving, it's very easy to use food as a coping mechanism. But there is, some self-reflection, and there is some, like if you grew up in a home where food was used to comfort or reward or punish, or food was unavailable, this can all influence the foods you choose. And further self-reflection and counseling could be helpful. So there is that is a factor. And there's a great podcast by Christy Harrison where she goes into this emotional eating a little bit more. But I will say that very often the deprivation piece is a big factor. So exercise, feel the difference. And Dr. Faraci used the same quote when she was talking about walking with a doc. And exercise is a celebration of what you can do. It's not a punishment for what you ate. And that is not gonna make it fun. And if you're, trying to, count calories and you ate, 1,000 calories and you gotta burn, 1,000 calories, it's too much math and it's not fun anymore. So the evidence shows that there are many benefits to regular exercise, from stress reduction to chronic disease prevention. And we need to move away from the focus of using exercise to change our bodies and focus more on the intrinsic pleasure of movement. It feels good, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be, running marathons, whatever you enjoy, it can feel good. And deriving pleasure from physical activities may be one of the most important factors for sustaining consistent exercise. So what about nutrition and the dietary guidelines? So as I was saying, the desire to include nutritious foods in your eating pattern naturally evolves when you achieve competency in the other intuitive eating principles. When you eat high fiber and you're, pooping regularly, that feels pretty good. When you're constipated and, you're, having whatever else, that doesn't feel so good. So it just naturally evolves. When we start to be more prepared with foods at home or when we're out, we can better tune into what we're craving and satisfy those cravings with foods that nourish. It happens naturally. When losing weight is no longer the focus, increasing fruits and vegetables and pleasurable movement to lower blood pressure, for example, becomes a more motivating goal. So, when or when not to eat? You guys could probably answer this, right? We want to eat when we're feeling hungry, and don't eat when you're full. And the full piece, we didn't really go into too much about that, but as you get more in touch with your hunger, you will naturally get more in touch with your fullness. And so that is something that's why it's so important to check in with yourself every few hours to see when you're feeling hungry. Because if you're dysregulated with your hunger, you're going to very likely be dysregulated with your fullness and eat past fullness. But it also helps to enjoy the foods you're eating and make the time to experience it. Get enough sleep. Don't use weight as a predictor of your health. And appreciate the little things you do for your health because they all add up. That's it. Thank you.